uh, the resolution gets bad, just like let me know. Okay. So, can you guys hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay. So these
And
are the different
yeah,
comm roles. And this is what I wanted to talk to you guys about because that seemed to be what we were having some confusion on. It's A, what do people do? B, what's like the order of operations? And C, like what does that sound like? So I'm gonna start with what are the different roles? So the first one I'm gonna talk about is pretty straightforward. It's the ult tracker, where they're gonna be the ones who are keeping a heads up with regards to what ultimates we have and what ultimates they have. I think the most obvious instance where we talk about this is before fights. Um, but it's also something important to keep in mind in the middle of fights. So if you know, okay, the enemy team is probably like halfway to Cole, that means that if we have like a longish fight, that the enemy team is going to use coalescence in the middle of it. So that's going to shape how we want to take that fight because the fight becomes much less winnable when the enemy team is going to be able to throw an ultimate like coalescence in there to swing it. You know what I mean?
right.
So I think a lot of the times when we talk about ult tracking, we talk about it as like, okay, it's your job to basically call out what else they have and then your job is done. And it's like a little bit more than that because what this is going to do, because ultimates are so powerful, ultimates are going to shape how we take engagements. Okay?
Yep.
So the IGL, the in-game leader, the shot caller, whatever you want to call it, this is going to be someone who tries to translate that ultimate information into a game plan. So I think this is something that we really struggle with as a team because we're a bit tight or we're a bit rushed. There's sometimes where like we're really good about it, but it almost depends on like what we're playing into, what map we're on. Um, this is not easy. And I don't want you to think that if you are this person or if someone else is this person, that it's just on them. Whatever plan they make, it's like, that's what we got to do. We just need to be on the same page. If someone's making a plan, if someone's like, okay, we should, if we're playing like a Ryan Brawl versus a Ryan Brawl, we should engage fast and use Blizzard first. Well, okay, but they also have Blizzard, so how are we going to do that? What are the things that we need to do to make that successful? Well, we need to rush down the Mei. We need to DM the Mei as we walk in. Maybe we have like our Lucio like a little bit split just in case he needs to come in with beat, like things like that.
Right.
It is not on one person to figure everything out. This is just the person who's going to be able to like take that initial information and the initial ult information and translate it into okay, here's what we got to do. And I'm gonna like show you what that sounds like. Do you guys have any questions so far?
Not really, no.
Who else is in here? Winter?
Yep. What's up? Sorry, I was having some issues with Discord, so I've only been here for the past like 2 or 3 minutes.
Okay. Do you have any questions?
Not at all. I'm following along pretty well so far.
Okay. The next two I have are scouting and pathing. Um, these roles change depending on the composition that you're playing. So if you're in like a brawl, for example, who's going to have the best perspective or vantage point?
Ryan.
Brian because he's in front, maybe the diva because the diva can poke forward with DM.
Yep. It can fly up to a high ground and then drop back down to the team, maybe.
Hmm. And then with maybe like a dive comp, it's be like a tracer, it's gonna be a sombra. So the roles and responsibilities of these two tend to ping pong between like the off tank and like one of the DPS. Essentially, the scouting is just going to give information on where the enemy team is. Now, if there's an Ashe on high ground, right, we're like, okay, the Ashe is going to be on high ground, but where on high ground? Who's playing around the Ashe? Is there someone that's like isolated? Is there a support that's like hiding in the back because they're, trying not to get caught in ultimate? So these are going to be the things that influence really where we take the fight or how quickly, or what we need to watch out for. And again, I'm going to be able to give you examples and tell you how this sounds like. And then with pathing, it's going to translate that information that the scouting person has said. Be like, okay, there's an ash on the left side. We can rotate left side before we engage, and then go up and try to push her off first. So just like how the IGL is translating the ult information into how we order our ultimates and take the fight, the pathing person is going to translate the scouting information of like where the enemy team's locations are and translate that into, okay, where should we go? Again, it's not just the pathing person's job and it's not just the in-game leader's job to translate this information. They're just going to be the ones that get the ball rolling. Maybe they're the ones with the best vantage point, stuff like that. So when I say best vantage point, when I mention scouting, someone who's got a lot of mobility or someone who can go invis like Sombra, they're going to have a great perspective of the enemy team. But when I talk about pathing, you want someone who can facilitate rotations. So that could be D.Va with Defense Matrix, that could be Lucio with Speed Amp. A lot of different people can play these different roles. It's just a question of who on the team has the greatest level of comfort with that part of like game comprehension. So if you feel like, oh, well, I'm the D.Va player and I feel really good about tracking ultimates, I eat ults all the time, but pathing doesn't come as intuitively to me, that's fine. We can organize these comm roles depending on what our own team players' strengths are. And then the last two I want to talk about are flank control and fishing rod. So the flank control is typically someone who watches a lane or someone's back. Now, when I say watches a lane, do you guys know what I mean?
So I'm guessing it's like the
Like,
lanes of
A,
pathing.
a
yeah,
line of
like
sight,
where they
essentially.
can go, where
So,
the enemy team can path to.
so I'm gonna post something into the Discord if I can find it.
Just be aware that Winter can't
I was gonna
see.
say I will not be able to see it.
Okay, I'll send it to you.
Imagine winter not being able to see Frost Nova General.
Badge
Copy
someday.
image. Okay, so I'm sending you this screenshot. I want you to look at it. So think of a map as having these like imaginary yellow lines where they're going to represent like almost like lanes of a road or like a highway. On any given map, we need to think about as a team map control and more specifically lane control. So this is an example on Rialto, but if you imagine first point Kings Row and you're the defending team, you need to keep an eye on the little passage through a hotel because it's a direct route to your backline, right?
Right.
Someone has to be in charge of making sure no one flanks, or if someone does flank, that they're not flanking uncontested, right? That's what I mean by flank control. There's someone who keeps an eye on or is ready to contest someone so that they don't have free access through a lane or free access onto our flank.
Right.
So who might be a good hero to control the lane?
D.Va Tracer.
Any more?
D.Va Tracer. I think maybe a McCree. McCree maybe is not the
No,
best,
McCree's
but
great.
um,
So why are these heroes good at controlling the lanes?
Either
they're
mobility or some sort of defensive tool,
Sure. They're
or I guess area control tool.
they're really good at winning one-on-ones.
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily that if so let's say we're playing Brawl Mirror on King's Row first point, and we have our McCree designated as controlling that lane, and the enemy McCree tries to push forward onto our flank. Our McCree doesn't necessarily have to come in. He's not like, I need to hunt down this McCree right now. I need to force this 1v1. That's not really the case. We just need to have someone who's A, keeping an eye on that part of the map, and B, is going to mark the person on the flank. So, for example, if we are running a brawl comp and the enemy team is running that, ball, tracer, sombra, zen, we might say, okay, let's have Lucio control that lane instead of the McCree, because it makes more sense for the Lucio to mark the potential tracer that goes through there as opposed to the McCree, because we want the McCree to be our win condition, and so we want him to be closer to the Reinhardt. Or we want the McCree putting more of his focus onto onto the primary part of the fight, not like just the lane. Does that make sense? Yes? No?
Sorry, yeah. I zoned out for a second. Uh, yeah, I think so. That makes sense.
Okay. And then the fishing rod is the term that I use to describe. Typically, I say the flex support, because the flex support is in the back. They're going to have a great perspective on what everyone's HP pools are looking like, as well as like the rest of the map, and what resources we have to be able to bail them out if they're overextending or they're getting low. So I say fishing rod because if a team overextends, or if they're supposed to be playing together and they start to like split up, the fishing rod is going to be the person that like reels them in. They're going to be like, okay, come back. We got to come back. Stack on Diva, stack on Reinhardt. Just comms to really shape the way that our team structure is organized in the middle of the fight, where that person is going to be able to recognize, okay, we have done enough, or we're at a position of weakness. We need to reload for a moment. We need to back up. So if you think about six man, the fishing rod might be Moira. So the Moira heals can be able to get everyone back. The Moira wants to be playing around the core, and she's going to have a great perspective because she can do those 180s to look around, to be able to say, okay, Tracer's on the left, Winston's on the right. We should probably bring them together. Let's group up here. Let's group up around, yeah, bookstore on King's Row. Something like that.
Something like that, yeah.
So, what do you want to do first? Order? Let's do how it sounds like first. So, when we talk about the ult tracker, on our team, this might be Blaze, this might be Vincent. That's how it's tended to be. Cabo does this as well.
I can also do it. Yeah.
Florida can do it. We just need to figure out who's going to say these words. And again, it's not on them where they have to say everything. So,
They generalize, and then teammates can fill in the gaps if they've missed anything.
exactly. So an example of what the ult tracker might say. They might be like, we have Cole and Diva Bomb, the enemy team has Shatter and Grav. They'll probably get beaten a long fight. And then maybe some information on how they might use those ultimates. So they may try to grab early on the corner. So the information is on our team, so it's us, and on their team, and then something we might need to watch out for. So what this information tells us is what resources we have available, what we need to watch out for, and maybe some additional information that might be helpful to the in-game leader as they translate that. Okay, and this is like again super quick. This is like 2 seconds. We have Cole and Diva Bomb, MA team and Shatter and Grab. Maybe they'll get beat late. They may try to early grab in the corner. It's not that complicated if you're like, I don't know what they have. Like, we've got Cole and Diva Bomb. I didn't see Shatter. Haven't seen Beat. Do you know if they've got Grav? And so I'm like, yeah, we got Grav. Or they'll be like, yeah, the enemy area has Grav. They're like, okay. The only thing that like we really need to make sure as a team is that we have this conversation. Because when we don't have this conversation, we commit assuming that like we're good, and then the enemy team just turns the tables because ultimates are so powerful. Are there any questions on this?
No.
Okay. So then next, we would say, okay, we know that we've called Diva Bomb, enemy team's got Shatter and Grab, and they'll get beat. Well, what does that mean? Here's the fight planning part that I really try to harp on. So typically I think this is Blaze, this is Florida, but it doesn't just have to be them. Again, this is everyone's responsibility. This is just going to be someone who's going to be taking point on this. You're like, okay, we know they've got Shatter and Grav. Let's push through main. We'll use our Cole early for space, and we'll try to shoot the Zarya to force Grav so that we can eat it with our Diva. Like our Diva can matrix the Grav. So we're not going to give the Zarya an opening to do so. And then we'll say, if we kill Zarya, maybe we toss her Diva Bomb deep so that we can get the kill, right? Cole for space, Diva Bomb for kill. And all we have to worry about is the Ryan blocking Shatter, and if like they've got someone on the flank, we watch them. Again, this can be super quick. Okay, we'll push through main, use Cole for space, focus the Zarya early. We can Diva Bomb if we kill the Zarya. We just have to block Shatter and can't get flanked.
Roger.
So, what's the important information here? Where are we going? What's the location? What's the ultimate context? So this is that translation part. We've got this, they've got that. Here's how we're going to deal with it. Who's the priority target? So in this situation, Zarya would be the priority because if we can pressure her early, it may force her to use Grav, and so it'll give us the best opportunity to eat it. And if she doesn't use Grav, then we'll maybe be able to get a kill, and that's a 6v5. And then what's something we might need to watch out for? So if we're like, okay, we've got this game plan, we understand how we're going to take this fight. Their only real win condition is getting this Grav, getting a Shatter, or some shenanigans on the flank. That's what we got to watch out for. Our Ryan is watching their Ryan. Our team is pressuring Zarya, and our Diva is watching the Zarya. We just need to make sure that we don't get flanked. Right? So in
Roger.
this comm set, I know it looks like a paragraph. It's just setting priorities. Maybe a couple points for like the team or for like one person. So who are these calls directed to? The first one, push through main. That's telling the team. Okay, that's setting expectations of where we're going to go. We're going to use Cole for space, and we're going to focus the Zarya to force Grav.
I don't want to break the immersion, but Cole, are you just spelling it for fun? Or, well, actually, I guess that is how you spell Cole shortened. I always thought it was C-O-L-E. Sorry, that's a side
What?
drink topic.
It's just think Florida doesn't know how to spell.
Yes, this is a lesson in me not knowing how to spell. Okay, so yes, okay, I was wrong. All right, continue.
Push through main, use Cole for space, focus Zarya to force the Grav. So these are all telling the team what's going to happen. But this is also giving specific information to individual people. This is telling A, the Moira to use Cole when we push through choke. This is telling the Lucio to go to speed as we push through choke. This is telling the Diva to DM the enemy Zarya, as well as if something happens, like if we kill the Zarya, the Diva is going to toss her bomb. Right, so in these comms, different pieces of information are going to translate differently for your teammates. And then Rhine block shatter. That's not something the entire team is going to use for information, right? If you're a Lucio, Rhine block shatter isn't it doesn't do anything for you. But it's important to note because we can't have our Rhine forget. Our Rhine's responsibility here isn't going to be swing on the Zarya or like win the Rhine 1v1. All he has to do is not get shattered. That's his personal win condition in this fight. We have everything covered because of like what ultimates we have, i.e. the Coalescence, where we're going to be able to get that space and we're going to be able to focus this area. All the Rhine has to do is block shatter. So you're identifying an individual responsibility. It really makes the Rhine's job easier if he knows what he's doing. Watch for McCree flank on right side. So this is primarily going to be for our McCree. Maybe our Diva, or like our Lucio. Maybe like our Bat because he's, or maybe our Moira because she's like the weakest to the McCree flank. it's whoever's in charge of flank control in this situation, it would be the McCree. They're going to take that information as well, but it's something important to keep in mind for the rest of the team. Even if they don't have to like commit resources to it, they just need to like remember it. They just need to keep it in the back of their head. Because if they do that, as they're pushing through, as they're in the mid fight, they might think, okay, I just want to shade a little bit to the left because I know I can't get flanked to the left and I might be able to get flanked from the right. So I don't know if our McCree is really watching, although the McCree should be watching. But just in case, I want to minimize the potential for myself getting hurt. So this is, I think, one of my favorite parts of shot calling. And this is like when I was playing on 30 FPS, how I climbed. It was being able to translate all this information for my teammates in a way that's important and relevant and makes their jobs clear. This is like difficult. This is like probably the hardest part of like shot calling. It's how do you say all of this information not quickly but succinctly. And you don't have to overthink it. You're not going to be perfect. People will help you out. But just like if you know the enemy Ryan's got shatter, just say, "All right, Ryan block shatter. Don't worry about swinging." So then when we go to scouting, and I like to say scouting or target priority, because when we think about like in a brawl comp, we're not really scouting a ton. Maybe we're scouting a little bit, but really we're setting the target priority. So if the diva is the person who's in charge of scouting or target priority, her number one objective here is going to be eating that graph, right?
Right.
So our diva, Winter for example, might say, Zarya's holding right side. She looks like she wants to grab early. There's also McCree on the right side. So we can hard engage on the Zarya with DM. Again, just reiterating what the shot caller said about focusing the Zarya for grab. If we think the Zarya's on right side, this is the target priority. This is the behavior, like where she's standing, what she's looking like she's gonna do. Like she might bubble early. And then what's like some context, her location. There's also someone like right next to her, so someone we might need to worry about. So if the McCree is standing next to the Zarya, that means that our McCree doesn't really need to be watching the flank because the primary threat for that flank is going to be is like in that location. And then instruction for the team, we can hard engage on her with the M. So this is setting the expectation that when we hard engage on the Zarya, it's not just suiciding to the grab. We're hard engaging with the expectation that we have DM behind us. Again, information for the team, information for the team, information for the team, but more specifically for McCree, and then information for the team. I'm going to keep going. I want you to speak up and stop me at points where it feels like too much. Then we'll go to pathing. So in this situation, it might be a Lucio. Again, reiterating what the shot caller said, we're going to hard push through main with Cole and speed amp. Ryan shield us through, and they'll say, are we ready? And we'll do our 3, 2, 1. So where? Again, we're pushing through main. How? We're going to hard push. With what? Call and speed amp. We're going to confirm, are we ready? And then we'll count down. Really quick, we give this to the Lucio because the speed boost is the operative cooldown that we're going to be using that's going to facilitate. It can't just be the Lucio. It can also be the Reinhardt calling, right? So the Reinhardt would say, Lucio, can you speed in 3, 2, 1? It really just depends on like what our level of comfort is. There's a lot of ways to do this. I put
Right.
this arrow here because these two tend to be a bit more interchangeable. So the Lucio might be the one who says push through main, use cool, and use space, and then the Reinhardt might call for the cooldown. It doesn't really matter who does what. We just need to have an understanding of like who is saying what, who is going to be calling for certain cooldowns or like ultimates to be used, so we don't like get confused. So we're not like going on top of each other.
Right.
And then flank control. McCree's on the right side. We can push him. Speaking to like Lucia Diva Bap. So this might be at the point of engagement or like early in the fight. Um, if we know that the McCree is like isolated on the right side, our McCree can just like mark him, make it so he doesn't get value and try to force him out, or we can have our backline take an aggressive action on top of him, right? So this would be a situation where we can tell our Ryan to play slow, and the rest of the team does like a short dive or something like that. It's typically like Lucy and Diva dive together in these brawl comps. Not like a we're gonna dive the backline, but like if there's someone isolated, Lucy and Diva can get there really quickly. They've got DN, they can shut down something. So in a
Right.
call like this, so let's say Scarrow is playing first point King's Row. We're on defense. The McCree tries to push through left side. You saw that he used his roll. Scarrow, you might say, Lucio's fading on right side. Can we push him, Winter? And we're just like, yeah, I've got boosters. And it's like, okay, let's go. So who? We're talking about the enemy McCree. Where? We already talked about the right side, but it's just reiterating the location. We're going to do what? We can push him. And then who are you talking to? You might say Blaze. You might say Winter. You might say Cabo. It just depends on like who are you playing with? Who do you have the best communication with? Who's got to worry about other things? Like we don't really want our diva to push the McCree if we're worried about Grav. But if we're worried about Grav, we're not really taking this aggressive action. We might have the Lucio do it, or we might just have the BAP put down like suppressive fire with the McCree. Or he might like the McCree might push forward, and Scarrow might say, "I'm gonna push the McCree on right side. Cabo, can you heal me or can you lamp me when I go?" So asking for specific resources, making those directed calls. Similarly to the last one, I do have this arrow here. These two can be interchangeable. So you might have like the Diva selecting the target priority or the McCree selecting the target priority, right? So if you're playing like the Ryan Brawl comp and you're going against like a Pharah, the McCree can be the one who's like, okay, the Pharah is playing on right side. We can rotate right side and I can take her out or something like that. Again, these are not like hard locked roles. You're going to have to ping pong between one or two depending on what composition we're playing or your level of comfort. It's not all on you. You're not like the one person who's responsible for this. You're just going to be the one taking charge and you're going to have to ask for help. And then the last one, fishing rod. The Moira might be like, or the BAP might say, keep going, Lucio can stay cart. And then like later as we start to lose health, we start to overextend, like, okay, we can't go deeper, we've got no more heals, come back. So it's just at like the tail end of the fight or like in the middle of the fight. Do what? Make a directed call to individual people, so like telling the Lucio to stay cart or telling the Ryan to back up. And then what's the context? We've got no more heals, come back. So how I've talked about this has been in the order of operations. So you ults first, then game plan, then see what the enemy is, and that's gonna reshape the game plan a bit. And then we say, where do we go? So in that where do we go section, it might be, there's a McCree on high ground. Let's go upstairs before we engage. And we can force him off, and then we can drop engage on the rest of the team. And then same thing in the middle of the fight. You can call for commits on individual targets. You can call for certain targets, control the flank, pull them back. I think a lot of the things I've talked about here, you guys do already. I think the two that we struggle with the most are translating that ultimate information and then calling to come back. Where a lot of the times we all in, especially when we're playing like compositions with Lucio, but we don't have to. And the person who's going to have the best perspective on that is going to be Cabo. But as like the Reinhardt, if you're like, my shield's getting low, we can't push anymore, let's come back. It's not just the flex support's job to say we're overextending. It's also like anyone who has that perspective. This is just the person who's going to be like, okay, I have taken this duty, but everyone else needs to give input on these different roles. So I think yesterday when I talked about this, Scarrow said it was a bit frustrating because it feels like at the same time we're supposed to have these responsibilities, but I can also do other stuff. I want you guys to do other stuff, I don't want you guys to think like I'm the ult tracker. My job is ult tracking. That's what I'm gonna do. That's how I'm gonna contribute to the team. We all need to be talking. We all need to be giving information. It's just when we need to talk about that stuff. When we're in this point of the ODR operations where we're talking the pre-fight or we're in the middle of the fight, we need that information, and it's just easier if one person is just like designated to consciously think about that thing. So, just to give you an example, if I'm the Reinhardt, I'm going to be looking at the enemy team running around. I'm going to be looking at the Reinhardt. I'm going to be thinking about his shatter. I'm going to be thinking about like Maywall. It's hard to consciously think about like every cooldown that comes out or like who's on the flank. But like I as the Reinhardt need to worry about those things. So I need to rely on my teammates to tell me what to do so that I can do my job because there's just so much going on in a game that it's too hard for one person to keep track of everything. So that's why you divide responsibility. It does not mean that the McCree can't say I want to speed boost High Noon. This is how I want to take the fight. It just means that as like a default, my job is to keep an eye or to think about or talk about this thing. It's not the only thing that I can do. It's just my default. So we make sure that someone default has that thing covered. And then we can cover each other as like we have different opportunities to bring it up. So, do you guys know what the word agency means?
Um, I don't think I do, but is it like having the
The,
ability to do something?
the
Mm-hmm.
word what?
Agency. Agency. Actually, type it up.
No, I don't know.
Curious
I'm
Googling noises.
I'm pretty sure it's how I said it was like the ability to do something.
Mm-hmm. So, what does that
Yeah.
mean for you? Give me like an example. It doesn't have to be an Overwatch.
Uh, I'm terrible at examples. But like I have the ability, I have the agency to write. I can write. Uh, I guess that's a little bit.
I was gonna say kind of like more like less like a capability and more like a specialization, I guess.
How do you mean?
Like, hmm. I'm also not good at explaining things. I'm thinking kind of like how you said, like if somebody is like given the job of ult tracking, but that's not the only thing they do. It's just the thing that they're is comes more naturally to them. It's kind of like,
I would describe that as default. So when I think about
yeah.
agency, it means exactly what Florida was saying. It means I have the capacity to do something.
Oh,
So
gotcha.
if I am walking in the street and I see a couple kids bullying another kid, it's not my responsibility to stop the bullies and help the kid,
You've joined them.
but I have that power within me to step in. That's part of my agency. So when I talk about agency within Overwatch, as like a McCree and a Brawl comp, you don't necessarily have the ability to just like wipe the entire enemy team. But there are some situations where you do. And I think this is something good that you do consistently, Scarrow. It's when you have High Noon, all of a sudden you're like, okay, I now have this ultimate where I can shape the team fight around me, and that's going to translate into a fight win. You having that ultimate available gives you the agency to shape the team fight. So when I talk about agency in general, not just with like McCree, but like with anyone on the team, certain resources or mismatches or parts of the map or ultimates are going to give you a special kind of agency that no one else on the team has. If we're playing a Ryan Brawl comp and we have a diva, that diva is going to have more agency to deal with someone on high ground than the Reinhardt. So they can say, okay, we need to deal with this Ashe on high ground. I need us to do this so that I can then do this more easily. Or I need to go put, like, just mark the Ashe on high ground, and then we can push aggressively. So when you talk to each other, when you prepare for a team fight, or when you're in a team fight, I want you to think about what is it that, because of the tools in my hero's kit, or because of like where we are on the map, what is it that I can do? And how can I get my teammates to either help me do it, or how can I communicate to my teammates that I'm going to do this thing and they can operate with that understanding in mind? So if we're in a Rhine brawl, on first point Kings are defense, and we've done a really great job and we've held them for 3 minutes, but now we're in an awkward spot where we have one ultimate and the other team has 3 ultimates. One of the points of discomfort there is that if we're like in the middle of an escort map and we know that we're alls down, we're like, okay, well, we can play super aggressively here and we can take a dry fight and we can force ultimates, and that's how we retake the ult economy. But if we're on first point King's Row, we don't really want to do that. We don't want to lose the team fight, because if we lose the team fight, then they capture the point and they get more time. So this isn't really a situation where we can take a dry fight. So what can we do? What can we do as a team when we're fighting one ultimate versus 3 ultimates in a fight that we really don't want to lose? Well, we can go for an aggressive flank, right? So we can say, all right, Brown's fan as Reinhardt is going to play slow. He's just going to hold up his shield and Cabo's going to pocket him. And our Diva, McCree, Lucio are going to hard flank and take out the enemy backline. So even though we don't have ultimates and we can't take a trading fight, what we can do, because we have speed boost, because we've got DM, because we've got flashbang, we can really quickly swing that fight so that it turns from a 6v6 1 ult to 3 ult into something like a 6v5, maybe 2 ults to 3 ults, or 2 ults to 2 ults, or 1 ult to 2 ult. Just ways that we can take control of the tempo of the fight, ways that we can put pressure on the enemy team because we're working together, not just to play the way that we've always been playing, sitting behind a Reinhardt, maybe popping an Ant Matrix, maybe throwing Lamp to have our Reinhardt go aggressive, but because we recognize that in this fight, because of the ult economy, or because of the map position, we're in a distinct place of weakness. We can take a more aggressive, maybe a more risky play, but if we do it together, then it's a strategy that can win out. And that could be the difference between us having to fight through second and us basically just winning on first. Because if you think about it, even though it's 1 ults to 3 ults, right, we're in a position disadvantage. This is actually really good for us. Because this is the one fight that the enemy team has to win. If the enemy team does not win their 3 ults to 1 ult fight, then all of a sudden momentum is swung back in our favor, the ult economy is even again, the clock is going to be ticking low, they have to win this 3 ult to 1 ult fight. So if we can take out their backline before they can even do anything, then all of a sudden they've lost all footing that they can stand on, and we've swung it control back into our own hands.
Right.
With Overwatch, it's always like a flip side. Well, we really are not in a good position to win this fight. Well, the other team's also not in a position to lose that fight. You can take risks, but like you don't have to take risks alone. Taking those risks can be a part of the game plan. It doesn't just have to be, okay, I as the Reinhardt am going to look for a shatter and I'm just gonna fight it out, and if I find the shatter, I find the shatter, and if we don't, we lose. No, we can play around that, right? We can call for the McCree flashbang, we can back up early and continue to pressure shields so that we win out the shield war. We can speed boost either 3 people, like I mentioned, or we can speed boost all 6 people and just flip the map. We can speed boost them through a hotel and take out the backline. They're all different ways that we can take fights in ways that are reflective of our unique agency, like our cooldowns or our position of the map or our advantages against the enemy team, right? So the Diva, for example, is going to have a unique set of advantages if she's playing into Zenana versus if she's playing into Lucia Moira. Because the diva can just fly at one of those characters and blow them up because they don't have a good enough peel for each other or because they're super squishy. So when we come into matchups, like I remember there was one match where we struggled against the Sigma Roadhog.
Right.
We can make swaps noticing that so that we have better agency to deal with those heroes. So a really good counter to Roadhog is Sigma. So maybe instead of running the Rhine Diva, we run the Rhine Sigma. And so the Sigma's job is going to be that flank control, where he's just going to stick his shield out to block the Roadhog hook, and then once we see Roadhog hook and we block it, then we're going to go aggressive. So I think in the past someone told me that your last coach, or like when you're talking to Rook, is like you didn't really like making swaps. I want you to make swaps. I want you to look at the enemy team and say, oh, because of the composition that they've picked or where we are on the map, they're going to be super weak to this hero that's also in my hero pool. I'm going to swap to that hero and I'm going to tell the team how to play so that I can expose that weakness in the enemy team comp. And the best part about Overwatch is that happens a lot. So it might be, oh, the enemy team is super weak to Tracer. I'm going to go Tracer. And the enemy team recognizes that weakness and says, oh, they went Tracer and we're super weak to that. We're going to go Brig. And that back and forth is really what I love about Overwatch. So what we talked about so far is like different comm role responsibilities, what things are going to sound like, what's their order of operations. But really, it's how do we talk to each other? How do we want to take fights? But also, how do we decide how we want to take fights? Part of the things that I'm going to help out with in Scrim today is setting up those set plays. Those little mini dives that we do, those little risks that we can take in the middle of fights. I'm going to try to calcify them and we'll practice them more. But also, I want you to start to get creative and communicating with each other in match so that you can pressure someone specific to do something later, or so that you can take these little mini flanks. That's like our next step in terms of growing as a team. Not playing as like 6 individual parts or us playing like one standard way, like sitting behind the main tank shooting, but
Right.
us turning the fight into 2v1s for a few seconds and then we can come back and win a 6v5. Or us playing slow on the one hand and then another group goes off, wins a 3v2 or something like that, and then we come back and then we go forward. That's like the next phase for us as a team. But it all comes back to making sure we check these boxes of tracking the ults, figuring out a plan, picking out priorities, talking to each other about where we want to go, and controlling the flank and making sure we regroup. Because those plans and regroups are really what are killing us in matches.
Right.
I've been talking for a while now. Does anyone have any questions? But how does this relate to me? Or what's something that you've been thinking about and maybe we can try it and make it a reality? What's something you want to work on? Like this doesn't have to be like team oriented. You can just talk to me about you. Because what's going to happen is if, Zeno says, so Jarvis, I've been thinking about this. Can we do this? Well, usually it's not going to be me saying, yes, Zeno, you can do that. It's going to be, okay, so you want to do this, Zeno. How can we tie in Winter? Or how can we tie in Cabo? Because those people are going to be really important to making sure the thing that you want to do works out. And I'm not going to be playing with you guys. It's not going to be up to me to determine if that works out. It's going to be how well can you guys talk and communicate with each other and set expectations for each other, and how well can I prepare you to have that exchange.
Right.